Hey everyone, welcome back to the CHSAA Secondary School Podcast presented by Ryan Hart and myself, CJ Rosenborough. I'm here with part of our committee. We have Katie, Moto, and Megan on the call. We're going to be doing a little truncated episode today on All In, All Covered. That's the Broncos initiative giving helmets to the schools, the public and maybe private. I don't know, that's a question I probably need to ask. Schools in Colorado. So we're going to be going through things that we know, things we don't know, questions we have, see if we can get some answers and provide resources to find those answers if we don't know them. So without further ado, I'm going to toss it over to Megan to kind of give us a brief overview of what the program is.
Good morning. So the All In, All Covered is a initiative started by the Denver Broncos Foundation. And it's really, I think it's a cool program that's going to impact high schools over the next several years. The goal was to supply 227 high schools from 6A to 5A classifications. From 6-man to 5A classifications with the Riddell helmet, the Axiom. And there is a lot of back speculation of like why they chose that one or what's going on. But it's a pretty impressive helmet from what I know. I come from we currently are a 2A football program. And so we've had a variety of helmets over the years just with what we can afford and what we're doing. And so this is definitely a step up, I would say, in terms of helmets. It's pretty comparable to the other Riddell helmets, really, when you break down what's happening. The biggest component that's different is the data collection. And so in the top of the helmet, there is sensors, and they're actually sensors front, sides, back, top, that plug into a device, and you can see impacts for where those are hitting. Not all schools are using the data this year. Some are opting out of it this year and then going to potentially go into it next year. But ours is one of the schools that is using the data collection. And then I'm pretty impressed to see where that data collection comes from. And from an athletic trainer standpoint, it has been, talked about over and over and over. This is not a diagnostic tool for concussions. This gives us more information about where a kid is getting hit or how often a kid is getting hit. I think it's like a lot of the concussion, the more things that come out about concussion evaluation and things like that we don't use any one of those things independently, that all of those things kind of come together and give us a broader picture of what's going on around that kid that kind of helps us then make a clinical diagnosis. The other thing with this data that I think one of the things that was a big misconception was that this was going to be live data. At the high school level, we are not getting any live data. You get data the Sunday or Monday after, and it shows you for the whole week kind of what that data looks like. So then you can go back and kind of go, oh, this kid has been getting more hits towards the end of the week. Maybe he's getting really exhausted, something we need to look at that way. Kind of looking at the broader picture of an athlete and where they're taking hits as opposed to using this as live data on the sideline. And it's definitely not a diagnostic tool.
Absolutely, Megan. And, that's a great intro into what this is, what this program entails. And, you touched on a few things that is very important, when regarding concussions. I think all athletic trainers know that, any type of data point is meant to be a tool in our toolbox, not a definitive determining factor. And to CJ's point during the intro, it does cover private schools. When I was working for the private school in the Valley, we were 8-man football private school. So it does cover those schools as well.
So I have a couple questions. I have a lot of questions. First one is I want to make it very clear. Helmets are there to prevent skull fractures. That's the primary reason for them. I haven't seen any data that helmets do anything to reduce concussion, same as mouthpieces. So I think it'll be really interesting to look at this. And I think, just because they don't now doesn't mean they can't in the future. And this Riddell Axiom may. I don't know. I can't speak because I don't have any data in front of me. But I am curious. It feels like such a big missed opportunity with this data, or a big opportunity for this data. Like, you can opt in or you can opt out. And I know there was concerns on the data, the privacy of the security of the data and where it was going and what it was being used for and who owned the data. I think it'd be really cool. Like we have an opportunity here to have an entire state almost worth of data, which is huge. I know Virginia Tech looks at helmet quality and all that stuff like that, but we have a huge potential to look at all this and gather data if we can get that piece figured out.
I think it's really interesting because both schools that I was at when this was rolling out, and then all of the other 5A schools that I talked to, everyone said, "Oh yeah, this is really cool." I was like, "Okay, what about the data?" And they're like, "Oh, we're not doing that. Nope, we're all shutting them off." So the bigger schools, the ones that everybody hears about, they're all shutting their data off.
And from what I've heard from talking to other athletic trainers, from other coaches, that a lot of it is the big districts and their legal team is where everything kind of gets fouled up. And that was, kind of what made me sad for this whole program is that it felt like it got rolled out really fast and there wasn't enough time for legal teams and stuff like that to catch up to what was going on. And so they just were like, hard stop. Nope, we're not doing this until we have more information. But yet we're getting these helmets to these athletes 3 months after the program started. And so they was like, yeah, we'll take the helmet. This is great. But we don't want the data because some of our smaller schools like us, we were like, we can catch up with this really quickly. We can be in a room with our head football coach, our athletic trainer, our athletic director, our legal team, our superintendent, all on Friday and get this set. So a lot of the bigger districts, I feel like, just need time. And like CJ said, it comes from a research standpoint. It comes from a legality standpoint of who's housing this data, where's it going. And there's some valid questions, I think, but it was just we needed more time. And so I think a lot of people will opt into the data next year once legal teams and districts and things like that can figure out what they're doing. Like, a district like Jeffco, where you've got 18 high schools, they've got a lot of moving parts to figure out across the district before they're ready to all in.
I do think it was a missed opportunity for those who are rolling out this program. They could have explained the data
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
component a little bit better to the schools, to athletic trainers, how that data, like you mentioned, is being housed, how it's being used. I do think they could have gone a little bit more in depth on that. But as you mentioned, I think as we have the opportunity to dive deeper into the data side of it, I do think it's going to be valuable for research.
Yeah, I think it was very reactionary where it was districts came back with like, oh, we don't want to do this. And then Riddell was, oh, well, you don't have to have the data. You don't have to attach names to the data. Like that information, I feel like should have been rolled out when the initial program was.
Yes.
And so
I don't think it was part of the plan originally. I think it was after all the discussions. I don't know. I wasn't in the room, but from what it sounded like from our district AD talking, it was, hey, we're trying to figure out if that's possible. And then enough schools or counties or districts like pushed back on it and were concerned about it that they were like, okay, we'll make it optional. Which is, I look at the research side of things and I need to remember these are new helmets, which a lot of the schools have outdated helmets. So it's very good for player safety. Awesome. They're giving access to top of the state of the art equipment for these schools that might not be able to afford them. But the research part of me is like, oh man, if we're not collecting the data, what are we doing here? We're missing such a big part of this.
I have questions about who. Okay, so we talk about are you collecting the data at your school? Are you the one helping with that? So who is doing that at those other schools? Because on top of all the questions I had when this rolled out at a big school, I was like, whoa, which one of our coaches is responsible for this? And that's a question I have with all wearable data collectors. It's not just the helmets. Like we've talked strength and conditioning wise about monitoring heart rates, about monitoring recovery. Well, then you get into that and you go, oh, whose responsibility is that? And who has to stay up to date on which player needs the rest days and the responsibility that comes with all of that. So my question would be, who are we putting in charge of that? And at these smaller schools, like we've talked about recently, not having enough athletic trainers at the big schools because there's only one person. Who's collecting that and monitoring that? And then we're getting into the realm of the coaches collecting that and maybe a conflict of interest there. Like that piece of this and it's why the legal teams are all over it. It becomes a huge component to these.
no, I think that's an excellent point. And one of the things that got reiterated over and over is A, that this is not diagnostic, and B, as things rolled out, athletic trainers were not mentioned in a lot of the marketing, a lot of the like plan of things, where the data is going. And I think that was kind of twofold in that at bigger schools, there's just not enough capacity for athletic trainers to be managing that data. At smaller schools, there may not be an athletic trainer even present. So just pulling them out of that the data goes to coaches. The coaches are the ones who are in charge of that. And so, yes, from a legal standpoint, you're like, you have to be aware of that data and where it's going and who's evaluating it. I know for our school, we have Monday meetings already preset through the fall that include at least 3 people. So there's always, so it's never just the 2 people. It's always a coach, an administrator, and then somebody from our sports medicine team. And so we left those sort of like broad so that it, could be, doesn't have to be the athletic trainer. And I'm not saying that that's what every school needs to do. I'm just saying that that's what we've done, is to kind of go through the data. And that's, again, what we're going to do this year. We may absolutely change our mind and go, this was too overwhelming. This was not helpful. But it's somebody from our coaching staff, somebody from our admin staff, and somebody from the sports medicine team kind of looking at that data every week. The other thing that I think kind of plays into this is we have some old school coaches on our staff, and we've already joked kind of some of us that it's going to be hard to get some of them to buy into like, oh, what is this, this new fancy data that's telling me I have to change my drills. Like, it's going to take some of that buy-in to go, do you see how your defensive line is taking a ton of hits to the top of their head or a ton of hits on Thursday? Like, what's going on practice plan wise that way? And how do you need to or want to adjust? I feel like that was more of where the push, at least this year, for the data use from a coaching standpoint is, and making it the responsibility of the coaches and the football program to manage and adjust based on the data, not making it part of the sports medicine team.
I think having a licensed healthcare professional be part of that data collection can help that legal concern, because it's not just John, who's a I don't know, I'm making fun of one of my coaches, but does woodworking, is now in charge of all these kids' data and where it goes. But also, I know one of the concerns is that Riddell, I think in the language they were saying they own the data into perpetuity. And when they were de-identifying it, it's not really de-identifying it. It was, they were saying it were, but like you could very easily tie everything back together. But I like that you have the whole part of your team in that discussion, because it is a it's a team-based approach. You have to have your AD, you have to have your coaching staff, and you have to have you involved. One of the other questions that I have is, I think one of the misconceptions, and Katie, sorry if you have a question on this, we can circle back around to what yours is if I get us on a tangent. One of the questions was, what, from my understanding, there was a like lights on it that when it had a hit above a certain amount, it would light up like real time. Is that not accurate?
And I am not a Riddell rep. I am not an expert in these helmets, but from what I understand, no. There's basically the only light that's on it is inside under the top where you like turn it on. That's the only light that's on it. And then none of the data is real time. All you can see on your little device is the helmet connected and sending data to the cloud to then be collected and sent back to you the following week. There's nothing real time about any of the information at this point.
Okay, because that was a big concern in our discussions of, if I have a light on the helmet going off and it's saying, hey, a hit was sustained that might be concussive level event, and then I do an eval, they show nothing, I put them back on, and then 30 minutes later they start coming down with symptoms, which we've all had happen before. I now have a piece of evidence saying I should have held this kid out. So I can totally see a lot of ATs, if that were the case, being like, well, the light went off, you're done for today, and then we'll see if you actually got a concussion, just because I don't want to put you back in with one indicator saying that you may have. But I think what Ryan said, it's a tool in our toolbox. It's not the end all be all. So
yeah, I would absolutely second that it's not having the live time data, because we wondered that too. Like, we have some parents who like to come back at us about, you missed this, you didn't take care of this. And it was like, that data is not live. It gives us some information later. It's not going to it just like helps us recognize of, is there a kid? I think when we go and talked about like subconcussive blows and what does that look like long term over the season, and who then is more susceptible to concussions and things like that. It kind of helps us give, again, another tool in our toolbox to look at the background of like, hey, this D lineman is taking a lot of hits in this part. Should we just kind of keep an eye on him over the course of things, as opposed to making any sort of clinical decision based on a report that you get a week later?
That's a good point. Ties in with Boston's CT studies with subconcussive events too. So, Katie, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to go back to, you made a comment about the coaches and their old school approach to it. I think this is a great educational tool for coaches, especially having the data on. Um, my experience lately has been coaches are they're learning. This is my
Absolutely.
positive standpoint on football coaches. They are learning. They are doing not full 4 days of full contact practices anymore. They are going down to, rest days and off days and partial contact and shells and helmets only practices, because they're learning that that's an important piece of this. So I think we're on the right track with them, um, until we can get those old school coaches to kind of learn this. Well, at least this is real data to show them and say, look, your best player is going to miss games if he keeps taking hits to his head. We got to adjust for that. So I think it's a learning tool, and they're willing to learn. So I think this would be a good way to use it, as long as it's in the hands of the right person.
The intent of the data is to make corrections to the players in terms of their performance. If a player who should not be getting hits to the back of the head is getting a lot of hits to the back of the head, now we can start making adjustments with their stance, how their tackling drills are being run, that sort of. So the helmet sensors are more for player corrections during practice than actual concussion, management type data. That being said, CJ did talk about or mention lights in the helmet and real-time feedback. There are a few helmets on the market with real-time alerts. Things like the Shockbox, the Riddell Insight, and even the Jolt sensor helmets. So there are ones out there, but this helmet is not to be confused with that. Like Megan mentioned, there is a light on the inside, but that's a battery indicator light letting you know that the helmet sensors are turned on. The batteries in this helmet, from my understanding and talking with the rep, do have to be replaced every year, and or recharged, which means sending the helmet back to the manufacturer for that component. So those are some of the things that you know shouldn't be overlooked, but also need to be understood.
Yeah, I was just going to talk a little bit. That was one of the other um, points that came up of like pros, cons of this program. It's for a smaller school. I mean, for any school, getting access to free, high quality equipment is fantastic. The long-term potential con of this is the cost of it.
Yes.
And they are a more expensive helmet just at base, not significantly more expensive, but over the time of it is. The other thing is they are more expensive to get reconditioned, again, because of the battery components, things like that. So over the course of this helmet's ideally 10-year lifespan, they are going to be more expensive for programs to maintain. And I think that was one of the other, like, is this the best helmet to be giving out because it's going to cost more in the long run? But again, I think when you look at player safety and where this can change what you are doing, like you said about how we adjust practices, one of the Riddell reps was talking about they adjusted, their Thursday for a couple of kids because they were recognizing, on Thursdays, these kids are getting more hits to the top of their helmets. Is it because they're like looking at what that is and what other external factors are? Are they fatigued by that point? So they're not going through everything with proper form. And so I think it's using it that way, like you addressed, is much more beneficial. But the con of definitely the price of it is the price point is high on this helmet. And you have to, if you're changing, it's fit for every kid. And so if it if one kid gets it as a freshman and can wear it for 4 years, that's advantageous. But if, he leaves your program, or like for us this year, we gave it to a lot of our seniors. And so all of those helmets then next year are going to need to be refit, reconditioned,
Such a good point
pieces
right there.
replaced. So
Yeah, it's actually what I was just about to talk about. We haven't mentioned the scanning process of this yet, and as Megan was alluding to, these are custom molded interior aspects of the helmet, and kind of the way that is a sleeve is put over the athlete's head, and then you're using a phone to take multiple pictures of data points on that sleeve, which is then sent back to the manufacturer for molding the helmet, which is why there's a delay in time. Now, a few things that we learned, at least at my school, during this process. One is the time that it takes to put the sleeve on the athlete's head, take all the scans that are necessary. If you're a larger school, that's a lot of manual scans. It kind of goes back to doing baseline impact testing. If you only have one or two people who are doing these scans, and you have a team of, I don't know, 30, 45 athletes, on a team, that's a lot of scans, a lot of manpower, a lot of time. And then, as Megan mentioned, at the end of the year, you have to send that helmet back. If you scanned a senior, that helmet can't be reused for another athlete. You have to send it back, have the mold changed. And don't quote me on these numbers, but I think when I was looking into it, the recertification fee for this helmet was like $100 or $200, something like that. Maybe Megan knows the exact number, but like she was mentioning, it's not cheap. There is a cost aspect to having that done. And one of the other things, which I don't know too many coaches, maybe there's more coaches out there, but one of our football coaches who got trained on doing the scans, he had an iPhone 6, which I didn't even know still worked in today's iPhone ecosystem, as we're on like 17 as of September. But his phone wouldn't work with the scanning process. And we even tried some of the newer iPads to use iPads as the scanning, and the cameras weren't calibrated properly to work with their system. So there is a technology side to this as well. Is the school going to have to buy a specific piece of technology in order to do the scans? There is the option of having the Riddell people come out and do the scan. But at some point, if too many people ask, is there going to be a fee for that? So there's a lot of continuing questions around this program. CJ?
Yeah, I was gonna expand on that just a little bit. So just briefly looking and searching at the reconditioning cost, it looks like 30 to 40 per helmet. I'm not sure about the recertification. That's probably the 100, 200 that you were talking about.
Yeah.
What I am seeing is on the Denver Post. So I think Megan had a really good point. There's a serious discussion to be had about who is getting and how these helmets are distributed on the team. Naturally, they're going to go to the starters. They're going to go to the upperclassmen, the people who are getting more playing time, which may or may not be the population that we're seeing the most head injuries in. But again, I'm not exactly sure how. I think this has gotten the label of, oh, this is a decreased concussion program, but I think it's kind of, I don't think that's a super accurate way to describe it, because again, it is a helmet. But just on the Denver Post, looking at that, it says that the Broncos Foundation said it expected schools to recondition the helmets annually.
Yes.
Reconditioning, is that when you are getting it refitted to a new kid?
Not to my understanding, and Megan, you can correct me on this, but most manufacturers will take the helmet, they'll run it through an X-ray, look for micro fractures within the helmet skull, or the shell, I mean, and if it is, so the $30 that you mentioned, that's to replace the battery annually. I did ask the Riddell rep specifically about that component. So that's to replace the battery, is like you mentioned, 30 or 60 bucks, something like that. And then actual reconditioning is making sure the helmet stands up against another season of impacts. There's no micro fractures, there's no strip screws or push points, whatever the case is.
Okay, so is that just more expensive per helmet because of the technology that's included in it? Because every helmet has to get recertified every 2 years.
Yes. Yeah.
Am
And
I
that's
okay?
not specific to, this specific helmet. Like you mentioned, CJ, every helmet, there's supposed to be a recertification process. And that's what manufacturers do. They run it through X-ray, they look for microfractures, they check all the, components of the helmet to make sure from a legality standpoint, should the athlete sustain a serious life-threatening issue, it can't come back on the manufacturer. That's the whole point of recertification,
Mhm.
is to make sure it can hold up to hopefully not cause a life, injury like a skull fracture.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, the first, do you guys know off the top of your head how many helmets are going the first
Depends
year?
on your
Roughly, I know
school
each
size. So a
Correct.
smaller
Yeah.
school, we're
Okay, so like
2A. We're
25 to
2A, we get
15.
11
I
each
thought it
year.
was like 25% of the roster or something.
Okay.
Yeah, we were 8-man football, so we got even less, I think. I think we got 8.
Okay.
Yeah, it's something along those lines,
Okay.
yeah.
So not huge. So there's a pretty good chance that every single one of those, if let's say we put them all to seniors, every single one of those is going to have to get reconditioned, which is $30 to $40. They won't have to
Yes.
get recertified the first year, but they are going to have to get refitted most likely. And then the second year, they're probably going to have to get refitted, reconditioned, and recertified. So yeah, that's a pretty big financial burden. I mean, it's still great program, but that is something
Mhm.
you have to talk about.
Yeah. Katie, did you have something to weigh in on that? Let's hear it, Katie. Have at it. I know you've been patiently waiting, which is sometimes hard.
I have so many things now. You guys keep talking, I'm not. No, so first of all,
Mhm.
I have been very patient. Yeah, I think I also heard 25%, but when you're talking about a football team that has 125 kids on it, now you're talking about 30 helmets a year.
Yeah,
You
they
know,
are.
like,
You got
so
bigger issues.
first of all, that. Second of all, gosh, I hope the same kid isn't wearing the same helmet all 4 years. It's gonna be refitted at some point. Those freshmen are not the same size by the time they're seniors. So so then, which leads me into the point I originally
Mm.
raised my hand for, and I feel like I'm a negative Nancy because I have so many questions and they're not meant to be negative. Guardian caps. Guardian caps going on top of these helmets voids the warranty. And I think we had too much stuff come out all at once. We want to throw all the protective barriers on that we can, but we just got the new helmets and guardian caps at the same time. So, we of course
Mhm.
are using both, and to say that knowing they're putting those guardian caps on top of the helmet when it then voids the warranty process, I've
It's
explained
not
it. I've asked
evidence-based.
questions.
That
Of
that
course,
that really puts a
I'm
thorn in
asking
my
questions and
hide.
wasn't
Like
there
this,
for the full
I get
explanation
the thought, and I
of
know that
why
there's
we're making
anecdotal
this
evidence
decision.
that exists,
Um,
but I haven't seen any
I don't
evidence
know.
that
Go.
guardian caps help prevent concussions. I know they void the warranty. It's gotta. There's some consideration of, is it going to mess with the data a little bit because you're having an extra pad on the helmet?
Well, so I can speak a lot to the Guardians because they were actually manufactured in the they were designed. Let me rephrase that. The engineering team who came up with the Guardian helmets was right down the road from where I was located in Atlanta several years ago. So, and you're right, CJ. There is a lot of research out there. A lot of the research right now is geared around neck injuries related to the Guardian helmets, simply because there's fabric now on what used to be a smooth surface, which can get caught in the face mask and torque the neck to where it can cause those injuries. But at the end of the day, when you think about a concussion, it's the brain moving within the skull. And, to CJ's point at the very beginning of this conversation, that's not what a helmet is designed to do. Yes, it may lessen the impact, but putting something on the outside of the helmet, um, physiologically speaking, it's not going to stop something on the inside of the skull from sloshing
Honestly,
around.
it's going to make me feel more comfortable that I can just not have to care about my head as much. So I'm not hearing that loud crack. I'm not getting that initial, like, if it's taking off, let's say,
Correct.
even just a pound of force for both of us, that's 2 pounds less of force.
Correct.
I'm just going to be, oh, I have a padded thing on my head. Have you guys ever played that? They play a lot of the pep rallies that we have. It's like the big balls.
Yeah, the soccer
Yeah,
ball
yeah.
thing. Yeah.
We go ham. Like, I throw my body around like
Yeah.
I'm like a teenager again.
People are flying 6 to 8
Yeah,
feet.
there's something to be said about if you add more protection, people are going to be more reckless with their bodies. And I think that's kind of one, if you're not hearing that loud audible crack, if you're having a little bit of padding
Yeah.
on it, it's not doing anything except for encouraging you that, well, I must be a little bit safer because that didn't sound as loud of a crack. But in reality, your head's moving.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a really good point, Ryan.
Yeah. And to Katie's point about the warranty, back in Georgia, I don't know if this was GHSA specific, but Guardian caps were only allowed during practice. They were not allowed during games. There was a lot of reasoning behind that. Some of it being what Katie was mentioning regarding warranty and manufacturers' claims. Other components, I imagine, we're going towards CJ's point about harder hits, as well as the floating around neck injury. At the end of the day, I think it was a trial and error invention. It probably made those university students who came up with it quite wealthy in the process. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a technology that fades away at some point. Or it's going to hang around like the 360 headbands in soccer that claim to reduce concussions, and it's just going to be one of those products that old wives' tale, I guess you
The
will, where it
fads
just
that
kind of
never go away.
it never dies because of misunderstood
All
information.
right, Katie, I know you got a longer list. Hit us.
Yes, go for it, Katie.
Well, that was my biggest that was the biggest list, was the Guardian caps, and I think athletic trainers listening to this, we all agree, like, the concussion force is inside the skull, we're not trying to argue that. I guess it's the amount of technology
Right.
that is hitting Colorado all at the same time right now, and I think that's our biggest.
It's a
It's
lot
not
to
really an
handle.
opposition, but
It
it's
muddies
like,
the waters a lot.
quit throwing
Yeah.
everything at
Yeah.
the wall and hoping it sticks. Like, yeah, you're first we had parents wanting to know why every school wasn't implementing the Guardian caps, and so then every school implemented Guardian caps, it feels like up till this year, we're on year 3 now, and now I swear every school that I know of now has them. And
Yeah.
then we got free helmets, and we're offering free helmets as an option as safety, and I just feel like there needs to be some parent education, administrator education on the topic as to stop just throwing things at it and saying we're protecting our football players. We protect football players by
Mhm.
teaching them appropriate training, appropriate tackling techniques, appropriate coaching. And I'm not sure that we're doing it the right way this way. I think the data would help. So my point is, I don't want the data turned off, but I'm losing that battle. Um, and I hear every athletic trainer screaming at whichever device they're particularly using right now, saying, "Katie, shut up. We don't want to manage this data. Stop it. Stop giving us more to do." However, if it can be used correctly, that's how football gets safer. But using it incorrectly, throwing a Guardian cap on a device that says you're not supposed to use it with it, throwing whatever other technique you want in there to try to prevent the concussion, it's a concussive sport. It's a contact collision sport. It's going to happen. My point is we need to interpret and use the data correctly when it's offered, but that means doing everything right, which is very cost inhibitive. And I
It's a
think
great
we
point,
kind
Katie. I
of
think that
rolled too
you
quickly with
can't
this
throw too
idea.
many things on top at once because then you don't know which one's causing what effect. And it's like we threw all these things on top all at once. And is it the helmet? Like, let's say we do see a decrease in concussions. Is it the helmet? Is it the Guardian caps? Is it the data that we're getting from the schools that have it and then word of mouth spreading? Like, what? There's too many things going on. We can't actually sit down and look and see
No, I think
what
you make
caused
an
it.
excellent point
We're going way
about
too
the
fast.
parent education, the athlete education. I feel like so many of the quote trendy things have taken off via social media and things without actually having any research base. I feel like I mean, not to touch on totally taboo topic, but baseline testing for the longest time, like impact was the the test that every kid needed to be impact tested. But again, where was the medical data saying that this is going to help in our diagnosis, in our recovery? Exactly. And so I feel like Katie's point of, educating parents about like, and I think you make an excellent point in educating coaches on changing how you coach to
It
decrease
made somebody
injuries,
very
not
rich.
putting
Mhm.
some external thing on that's going to miraculously make our kids safer.
Mhm. Mhm.
Absolutely. And I don't know how everybody's going to feel about this, but as an athletic trainer and as somebody who is viewed usually by the coaches as the expert on these matters, I think athletic trainers should be taking it upon themselves to do a better job of educating coaches and parents. We should be out there doing the research on these helmets, for example, and providing that education. Every athletic trainer should be meeting with the parents during their preseason meeting, and that's your opportunity. Provide some of that education. Now, yes, this came out at a weird time, but hey, I mean, football is rolling around. I know we've kind of already crossed that bridge of collecting the scans of who's getting the helmets, but that doesn't mean that you can't still meet with your parents and educate them on this. And real quick, jumping back to what Katie was talking about with the Guardians, how it slowly started with one school, then two or three schools, now every school. That's the exact same way that we saw that rollout happen back in Georgia. And by about the fifth year after the Guardian helmet was invented, every school in Georgia needed one. Like Megan was saying, it became the gold standard of equipment, if you will. And there was there was no research you're really backing it up from organizations like the NATA or sports medicine research based institutes like down in Florida, where they do a lot of research by athletic trainers on devices like this. And so that's kind of my 2 cents on that. I know CJ and Katie had a few more follow-ups. CJ, I'll kick it over to you first, and then we'll let Katie unleash.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that, Ryan. That was a really good point, and both of them were really good points. And I wonder how much of this push comes from parents saying, "Hey, these other schools," and a lot of times the bigger schools which have more funding can get it first, and then they see these big schools who are successful doing this, and the parents are like, "Well, why don't we have that?" So I wonder how much of it is a public perception of they're doing more for their kids to try and keep them safe, even if it's not evidence based. And then the second part is I think you're absolutely right. We need to take it upon ourselves to step up and educate. Like with Megan, when Megan said about the impact testing, there's a lot of questions about it. There's a lot of reasons why it might not be something that's repeatable and super effective. But are we taking the time to educate parents and coaches on that of why? Because if we just say, oh, well, it's not, I'm not going to do it because it's not based on evidence. Well, we need to convey that to the parents and the coaches, because the perception out there, I've had parents ask me, hey, should I take my kid to get baseline tested? Is it helpful? And I've had parents ask, like, do you guys baseline test? And at that point I can like intervene and educate of here's why we don't. You always can if you want to, but here's why we don't here. And they respond really well to that. And explain like, hey, I'm like impact test on the sidelines not going to be the same if they go in a clinic and do it. All that stuff. Don't want to get too much in the weeds of it, but I think we need to do a better job, and maybe it's just in my small bubble of people I know, of just educating parents about like where the evidence is, why we do or don't do certain things. And it's not an easy conversation to have because people are coming in with a certain point of view. Parents are assuming guardian caps are safe. They help my child. And then you're coming in saying they're not doing it. Should we even wear them? So it's a tough conversation to have. We already have so many tough conversations. So I completely understand why people are like, don't want to dive into that and just kind of want to sit back and be like, well, at the end of the day, it's not my decision. But also at the end of the day, it's kind of our responsibility as athletic trainers to step in and help guide and educate the school, the administration, and the coaches and the parents on kind of the best practice for safety. And I think that's something we always need to keep reminding ourselves, because it's so easy to just step back and be like, well, I don't decide equipment. Cool. But you should be a voice in the room. You absolutely should.
So first, Ryan, on the spot, where's my research? Where do I find it? Because all I can find is what the Broncos have put out, what the helmets themselves, what the guardian caps themselves. It's very biased research.
Yes.
So if you can find the research that shows me either side of the argument that's non-biased, I'd love to have some. And then I'm going to follow up mini story, because I'll keep it short. I have had that educational process. I had a very heated parent call me. Why don't we have the guardian caps? Every private school in the state has the guardian caps. Why aren't we using them? My son just got hit at practice yesterday, and now you're telling me that he might have to miss the game this week. Rah. I very calmly was like, no, I understand your point, sir. Can I give you the opposite side of the argument as to why I personally don't think our team needs them? And within 2 minutes, he was like, oh, well, that information would be very nice to know. And I said, you can write your $7,500 check to the athletic training program. Because he was going to buy them for the whole team. He was set. He was ready. He was like, why have we not purchased these? I will fundraise for it myself.
Yep. We had parents do that in Georgia.
Perception is reality. We had them the next year. There is nothing that beats it when the community then thinks they're safer. So maybe we can force our podcast on the community to listen to why there are reasons that we don't necessarily need them. But just for the sake of saying like that, it's very valuable to educate the parents. It only goes so far when you can only reach one person at a time. You can talk, you get into how long are the coaches meetings or the parent meetings lasting, and then how much time can you give, because I've got a lot of topics I could clearly stand up there and talk about. But it's one of those where you're like, hey, we're not going to do this because I said so. And it's like, well, it's not because I said so. It's because I was the voice in the room that had all the logical answers. When I say I look for the research to find it, and the only research you're finding is from the company that produces it. So where do we find the research that says yes or no, this is effective?
That's a really great point, Katie. And this is a great time to remind our listeners to share this podcast, outside of your inner circle. Make it available to as many individuals that you personally know. And don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons on that. Megan, I know you've been patiently waiting with a follow-up or a question, so have at it.
Yeah, I just have a couple of points about the data collection. I'm really anxious to see what this data collection looks like over the next several years. I know for our school, like I said, we get 11. We opted to buy a few more, so we're getting 15, which is a very small sampling for our program, and that will grow. So as we get more data points that way, but also just figuring out how to use it. I know there are a couple schools in Colorado who already have the axioms and have been using it.
Such a good point. When I did my thesis, my professor was like, gather more data than you need. Even if you don't use it, we can always tap into it in the future. There are universities that do these studies. It does not need to come from the high school, secondary school athletic trainers. Like CU Boulder, Virginia Tech, other entities can take that data that we've collected that's just sitting there and do a study off of it. So that's a really good point, Megan. Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. Megan, I think you back up what Katie was talking about earlier, and to her point, this program is so brand new. There hasn't been time for independent research, to be done, and with us not knowing where the data is going or not even being collected right now, there's not enough data points for independent research to be done. But on the flip side of that, you also have to think, like, when the Guardian was manufactured and started becoming popular, it took a good 5 to 6 years before research was able to even be conducted on the Guardian, because there's the financial grant aspect. There's, enough of the Guardian caps out in the population to actually get good data points on. And I think a program like this is going to be very similar. We're going to have to get enough of these helmets on enough heads and enough of the data points turned on. And then an institution like a university will be able to submit for grants to actually do this research. And that's going to take time. And, unfortunately, I would propose that we're probably talking a good 5 years worth of time before valid research can be done and then vetted through, institutions like the NATA, which then push it back out to the sports medicine community. Katie, do you have a follow-up on that?
Sorry, we said this was going to be short, and that was a lie.
I lied through my teeth when I said that this is a truncated episode.
So it just popped into my head as you were saying that, Ryan. You know how many youth camps I've covered where I've seen Guardian caps?
Mm-hmm.
0.
Yep. 100%.
So far in Colorado.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that the perception is these are going to prevent concussions, but the 14 and younger age groups aren't wearing them.
I don't even know that they make Guardian caps for that small of a helmet, to be honest with you. I mean, I know in Georgia, it took us a while before our middle school helmets were able to purchase the Guardian. Our middle school
That
teams
might say something.
yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah.
When are these helmets rolling out? And Megan said that they she's not on.
It was about 3 to 4 months, I think, after, was it May was the cutoff, I believe, something like that.
So teams have them.
They're starting this fall.
Yes.
Right now.
Yeah,
teams
we have them.
fall.
They're coming.
Yes,
There
you
you
are,
are.
Megan.
Yeah.
There you are.
So theoretically, teams should have them for the summer camps, right?
Well, for the fall. Yeah. Well, why don't we open it up a little bit, maybe to Celti or Moto, see if they have any thoughts on this. They may not. Celti is now in, and I'm guessing she's with us, but Celti is now in the clinical setting. So, do you have any input, maybe from the clinical setting side, regarding how the all-in Axiom helmet program may affect things from the clinical side of things?
Not specifically with the clinic, just because it's, to be honest, I think I see somebody less than 40 years old once a week. So I don't, and right now I actually, even in my hand clinic, I'm not seeing, it's more basketball and those kinds of sports versus the football. I guess just in general, even yesterday we went out to eat with a friend, and I'm watching the fall football camps, like the preseason camps, and I think that is a huge player with a lot of these families and these athletes. They want to be those pro athletes, and when they're showing clips of the preseason camp, and there goes a guy running by with his Guardian cap on, and they're like, oh, he, this is what's keeping him safe, and the families are seeing that as well and saying, oh, well, pro football is doing this, so this has to be okay for my kid too. And I see that as being and that was something too while I was in the secondary school, at the high school, that I would have parents that would come with the Guardian caps with all these gadgets that are like, oh, well, this pro athlete, how many times in kinesiotaping they say, oh, well, this guy kinesiotapes, so that's got to be, perfect. I know that's a whole nother topic, but anything that they're seeing that somebody they idolize, they're 100% going to be like, oh, well, I need that too, because that's going to make me be exactly like them. And so these parents and the families are seeing this as well. And if it's good for a pro athlete, then it's got to be great for my kid.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They don't realize that it's a throw everything at the wall and see what sticks mentality in professional sports, whereas they do use evidence, but we have to, we're constrained by budget and time and athlete numbers. So we have
that's
to
the
go
big
based
word.
on best.
That's
Yes,
the big word,
yeah.
CJ, is budget, money. A lot of people fail to realize that professional sports, are backed by millions. Their players' contracts are worth millions. So yeah, they're gonna get access to more products to use, and I think that is lost sometimes on the secondary school level in terms of parents and that sort of thing. Moto, I know you had a thought there. Go ahead, have at it.
Hey, guys. I I agreed on everyone's point so far. The budget is one thing for sure. For school like smaller school like where I work, and I agree on Megan as well. But like helmet is required to wear, and if that can be covered, that is a stance that I feel like my school has to, be able to have that supply expense covered. Yes, the reconditioning part and recertification part, that I kind of start to understand how that process goes, and it is in a way comes with a cost, but at the same time, what's required, what's in front of you, we can take that. So that's one point we had. We just purchased. I wasn't part of this conversation, but the Guardian cap we just bought last year for however the roster was last year. And yeah, that same goes. It's gonna be pros and cons of after the purchase and how we're gonna use it and whatnot. But yeah, like to me, the point was having that idea of this is a football program, not rugby program, and having a helmet is a requirement. And to an extent, like we cannot just going for free stuff, but at the same time, if that is covered, that is pretty useful.
So what I'm hearing is Megan's going to do the best job at this. She knows the most. She's participating, and she's going to give us a full report in November when football's over, and we're all going to know how well it works for her school so that we can bring it to all of our schools.
Yes, and if you have any questions that speaking to all of you across the entire state or other states listening, feel free to shoot Megan an email.
Y'all are out your minds.
Yeah, definitely stay tuned for that follow-up episode, because it is going to be interesting to see how this plays out this season. And I'm sure the secondary school committee is going to bring you a follow-up podcast episode. Final thoughts from anybody? There is one member who we haven't heard anything from yet, and I do want to open it up to Jordan, see if she has any thoughts on that, and then we'll kind of wrap up this episode with final thoughts. Before we hear from Jordan, though, Megan, one last final thought.
I was just going to say, Katie had a question at the beginning, and I can't remember what it was. Do we want to address that? I don't.
Sure.
Before we started recording.
Does anyone remember what it was? That'll be the key point there.
This is why CJ was like, stop.
Exactly.
We're going to record. Stop.
Yeah. Oh, was that the question you were talking about?
Yeah, Katie asked a question, and then we were like, don't talk, but now I can't remember what your question was.
Shoot, that was a really good question, too.
Yeah.
It was a great question, but then you guys started a podcast, and I got distracted.
Your question was, how dare you turn off my data?
Right, yeah.
Get off my field. Jordan, do you want to weigh in here on this topic?
I will say, so I was part of fitting all of our kiddos with the technology. I did find that very interesting and kind of awesome, because I've put on a football helmet before and they are not comfortable. So if there's any way we can make them fit better and feel better for the athlete, I'm all for it. I know Katie wants the data. I am one of those ATs that does not want the data. Just because we all know our time is crunched at the high school. And if I'm in charge of looking at every hit that hits a certain threshold on the data, I'm not going to have time for any other sport whatsoever or any other treatment. Because we know that the data is going to be sent to the athletic trainer because the coach isn't going to take care of it. So I am all against the data, and not just for the work that it puts on me. I also feel like this is kind of a tactic from the manufacturer to take the liability off of them. So if something happens, they're like, well, there was this hit and you didn't follow up, so it's your fault. It's not a manufacturer's fault. You can't come back on us. It's not our liability anymore. So that worries me a little bit, that manufacturing might take a dive if they don't feel responsible for manufacturing good quality products.
So, and that's something I've heard before. You're not alone in that. I think the kind of what I always say to that is helmets aren't meant to prevent concussions. So yeah, and
They're
everything
not.
we talked about this earlier, but everything it's a piece, it's a tool that you use. It's not the end all be all. And I think it was one of the first things we chatted about when we hopped on of, is it going to put more liability on ATs if they have that data? But even what Katie said, like get the data collected. You don't need to look at it. You can get sent to you. Cool. You can maybe peek at it over the summer, or you can not. But if that data is getting collected and somebody else can use it at a large university or something like that, then it's extremely beneficial. I guess we will inevitably get some of the data sent our way, but it does not have to fall on the second, and it probably shouldn't fall on the secondary school athletic trainers to analyze that data, write a research paper about it, look at the population size, look at the like exposures. Like that is way above what we have the time to do. So I get what you're saying though.
Just how it was. Yeah, how it was rolled out was like, oh yeah, it's so you can tell when they have big
Right.
hits and need to be evaluated for a
And
concussion. I was like, no.
And it sounds like
no.
that's not even a case. It's more retrospectively from what I'm understanding. Like there's no live information on hits. It's like you get a report on Monday from the last week. So yeah, I think that highlights the fact that we really don't know a whole lot about what that data looks like, when we're going to get it, what it's going to look like when we get it.
No.
We need more information on that before any of us can really form.
They rolled this out really
Yes.
quick. Didn't really inform people about it.
Yeah, I was shown what the report looks like when you do get it from the rep. I mean, like you said, CJ, though, I wish that they had done a better job on the front end of explaining, hey, here's what it's going to look like. You know, here's the intent. The intent is not even for the athletic trainer to interpret the data. The intent is actually for the coaches to interpret the data to improve practices and reduce, poor techniques during practice. That's the intent of the data. But it wasn't presented that way, and if that's the case, then I kind of feel like they need some supplemental training for coaches, whether if it's like an online educational video or something like that, like, hey, here's how to interpret the data. Here's how you should understand the data. Here's how you should make these corrections in practice. I see Megan's like frantically waving her hands agreeing. I mean, and that is the misperception. Like it was presented like it's for the athletic trainers to get this data and use this data and determine what to do with it, when that's not even the case. It's supposed to go to the coaches to receive, digest, understand, and make corrections during practice.
So Ryan,
then I'd be all for it.
I'm actually going to play devil's advocate here against what you
Sure.
More so in that I think so. Yes, I think when it rolled out, there just wasn't enough information. It was rolled out in a flyer that was like, "Hey, we're sending these helmets to all the kids. Isn't this awesome?" And so there wasn't enough information. But I think as more things have surfaced, since February when all of this was rolled out, I think I would disagree that I think Riddell has done a good job, and I think people aren't taking advantage. I went to one of the Broncos trainings, and I was shocked at how few people were there.
Well, our school was not informed of a training. And I think that's because
I wasn't asked to
yeah,
go. I didn't even know there was a
exactly.
I
training.
didn't
That's
know there
my
was one
point.
either.
I think that's what I'm saying, and that's how it was relayed to me by the Riddell person. It's like, no, this isn't really meant to, the data is not meant for concussion side of things. Like, it can be used that way, but that's not why we have the data. This is what I was told.
Right.
It's for the coaches to use to make corrections for their practice. And if there was training, I mean, we had 2 Riddell reps come to our school twice, and we were never told about
Yeah,
training.
Megan, where did you
And so I
find out
think
about that?
Yeah.
Was it from your husband? Because then you have an in.
I was gonna say, I was gonna say, I do have sort of an inside track to how a lot of things with football happen. But so, and that's, again, I think it's just a huge lack of communication, because I have
Yes.
sat in on a training at the Broncos facility that was very poorly attended by athletic trainers specifically, because I think again, this data is not meant for us to interpret and to manage and to make adjustments. But it's something that we need to be a part of. We need to be part of that conversation. We need to
Yes.
know what's going
Great way to
on.
put it.
So I think it
Yep.
was poorly attended by athletic trainers. I also was like, there really weren't that many coaches there too, for how many, for how many schools are
Programs
getting
are getting it.
Yes. The other thing is, and again, I have an inside track. I sat in on a one-on-one with a Riddell rep who, when we got these helmets, like when we bought into this whole thing, we're doing everything, we're doing the data collection. The Riddell rep was like, hey, let's hop on a call. And we did it with somebody. She's not a helmet expert. She is the program expert. So she can teach us everything about how we collect the data, how it's managed on the phone, when the report comes, what the report looks like, all of that. And so I was invited to be on that call with our head coach, the coach who's in charge of equipment, those kind of things. And so I think a lot of that stuff is happening behind the scenes. They're just not communicating to all the parties that may need to happen.
Yeah.
Because I've been getting training, but I'm clearly one of very few people who have been privy to that.
Yeah, because I think I know exactly the individual that you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, I was going back and forth because my AD, which is also the head coach, kind of was like, hey, talk to him about it. Like, I'm involved, but from a secondary standpoint. And I was like, well, it's really supposed to be flipped the other way, but sure, I guess I'll fill this person's, emails. But yeah, even as the person who was the primary point of contact after our initial contact, I was never informed of a training that was happening. Katie, Celty, I see that you're eagerly waiting to weigh
Ryan,
in
word
here.
on the street is Katie.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to have like breaking news alert on here.
Yes.
Katie has remembered her pre-recording question, so we're gonna throw it to her.
Okay, Katie, have at it.
Oh no, did we lose Katie?
Wow, we finally got.
Celty, let's turn it over to you. Go ahead and weigh in, and then if Katie is able to maybe give our listeners another teaser of what she was talking about, we'll give her that chance.
Just as I was exiting, this was all starting to come to light and be an option. And I was at a very small rural school. And I guess my biggest concern when my coaches were like, oh, look, these free helmets with all this technology, so excited about it. And I'm like, you do realize we only have 30 football players, right? And we're not one of the big schools that has an offensive line, has a defensive line, has special teams, has multiple people. So when you guys are excited about this data and trying to figure out and thinking this is an end all be all and this is going to show you how you're practicing, you're playing, I have players that are getting hit every single play of every single game, every single minute, because they all play every side of the ball. And that was something when I was talking to my coaches when they were like, oh, this great thing that's about to come. And they're like, we want, we're trying to figure out how you're going to manage it and everything else. And I was like, not only is it so much time to go through that data and try and figure out what it all means, and then, I mean, I couldn't even get a weekly meeting with my coaches to discuss what we were doing for our away game on Friday. Plus, now can we sit down and discuss the data from our 30 football players that, happened last week, and how many of them with this data should be playing this week? And at what point in time are we canceling our season because we only have 15 guys?
You're absolutely right, Celty. And the school that I came from, we were in the exact same boat. It was 8-man football. Our quarterback, never came off the field, played like 3 different positions. Megan, I know you wanted to weigh in here, and then I think, well, actually, Celty, you threw up your hand very immediately. I'm guessing it may be to something that I
No, I
just
think that was
mentioned.
accidental.
What was your thought?
I'm not that excited about it anymore.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Gotcha. Okay. Megan, follow up to what Celty was just talking about.
No, I think she makes an excellent point of the smaller schools. We're one of those as well that has kids that play both sides of the ball, that play multiple positions. And that's one thing that we did discuss with Riddell and sort of, plans for the future and how do they make this program better is we can't identify a kid because one of the de-identifying factors or identifying is you put in their position. And so it says, like this D lineman, and it gives you the data about all of the D linemen once you have helmets on all of the D linemen. But you can't say that this kid is a D lineman and then he's an O lineman. And then, and so being able to kind of get some of that data is a little muddy in the smaller schools at this point because I can't say that my D line has like what they're doing needs to change because some of that data is from an O-line kid who is playing D-line at the time. And so I think Celty brings up a great point about ways that this program can improve over time is being able to tease out more where those hits are actually coming from in a positional space.
Yeah, I agree. That's a really good point. My quarterback a couple of years ago would play linebacker or safety or defensive end and then quarterback. So yeah, it gets muddy pretty quickly. All right. Because we were at an hour, 15 minutes after we all said none of us knew anything about this, we're going to wrap it up with one final question from Katie. And I have it written down in case she forgot in the 5 minutes since we've discussed it. Go ahead, Katie.
I did not forget this time. And again, hopefully Megan can answer. And I recognize that this is a question from a question. It was from the social on Monday. One of the other athletic trainers told me the helmets are removed differently than the traditional helmets. So, are the face mask features different? Is there a different way that these helmets have to be removed should we have to remove them?
Yeah, so we went over it with the Broncos equipment staff. It actually comes off a little bit smoother than the other Riddell helmets that we are in our school. But from what my understanding is, no, there are no issues with helmet removal. The face mask has the same little pops that you can use the Riddell tool for or a ballpoint pen. Pop it off. The trickier part with the new one is the way the face shield comes on and off because it actually slides into the helmet and has little buttons on the side. And so that's a little bit trickier. But in terms of when you think about emergency situations and getting helmet and shoulder pads off, it's going to come off very similarly to every other helmet I've ever taken off.
Okay, it took us an hour and 20 minutes to get that question answered. So I think that's a good place for us to finish off. I'm scared to ask for last thoughts, so I'm not going to. Yeah.
CJ, can I just
go ahead, Megan? Why am I making an hour 30? Yeah.
Megan's like, but I have a last thought.
I don't have a last thought. I just have a editing thing of now that I think back to my sort of intro. Can you edit out, or can you and I edit a separate time? I don't want to imply that my school is using subpar equipment because we are a smaller school, that it was like, this is really cool, we're getting these new fancy equipment because we have not we've done a great job of keeping up with what is best practice and getting our helmets reconditioned and taken care of. Our coaches are really awesome at that, making sure that everything is safe for our students. So I don't want to imply that this is great because we've had poor equipment in the past.
I didn't get the impression that you were insinuating that.
Okay, great.
Okay, so that was a really good conversation. It's funny because we all started saying we really don't know a lot about this, and then we've gone over an hour on it. So we will be doing more episodes on this. There's more information to come out. This is the pilot year, pilot season. There's going to be a lot more to talk about. So stay tuned for the next episode. For the CHSAA Secondary School Committee and for Ryan Hart, I've been CJ Rosenborough. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please shoot us an email with any comments, concerns, stuff we didn't talk about. Be sure to follow, share this with a friend, all that good stuff. But until next time, thanks for listening.